All right, we are live. Welcome to everyone watching at home. This is a comic book Yeti live event, and I am here, as you can see, with Steve Bryant and Don Cardenas, and we are talking about Evie and the Helsings. Um, Issue number 2, well, you can get issues number 1 and 2 are currently on Kickstarter right now, and I think for the next 14 days the campaign will be live. You might recall that Comic Book Yeti did a written interview with Steve and Don when issue number 1 was out, but now they're back again. Issue number 2, issue number 1 was fantastic, and I'm very excited to talk to both Steve and Don about Evie and the Helsings and about their other comics projects. So yes, we are in for a really fun and exciting time, I think, tonight. Steve, Don, welcome to Yeti Live.
Hi.
How are you both doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having us on. Uh, we're fans of the Yeti.
Well, I really appreciate it. I am fans of both of your work, and in particular, Evie and the Helsings. I really enjoyed, and there's plenty of stuff we can talk about and get to. I know in particular, Don, you had a story in Off into the Sunset, which I think I talked about on social media before, but I think it was
Yeah.
The Debt was just a fantastic short comic that I just thought was just one of the best short comics that I think I've read in the past few years.
Awesome.
Well, as I know, I said to you before, yeah, I really appreciate that. It's definitely something that was very bittersweet because there were so many great stories in that anthology that did not get the proper audience that they deserved because of how everything went down. And I don't know what's going on with some murmurs about something else happening with all those stories, but I really appreciated the feedback, especially from you and from everybody else about my story. It was a short story, but it was obviously something that I had in my head for a very long time. And when it came around for like a Western, I'm like, well, I have that. you know, it was actually a much larger. It was more like a one shot idea, but I feel like having to like think about it in terms of just like the 5 pages or so. I think that helped it out a lot, actually, and I think it really got me. It really got me to focus down to what is important for the story, and I don't think I lost anything from it. So, but yeah, I'm really glad you liked it so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great economy of storytelling to it. Not only is the artwork wonderful and it's very impactful, but when you have only a few pages to tell a story and to try and tell, a complete story, certainly it's something that you could see be expanded upon and be a one shot.
Yeah.
But to just boil it down to those couple of pages and really focus
Mhm.
in on what is really the heart of this. It was very well done, very well paced, and I just was blown away by it.
Well, I really appreciate that. It was also one of the few things I did literally everything on. From writing to lettering to coloring and all that, and is also one of the stories where I kind of started to feel like I found I found what style is actually coming from me as opposed to what I'm thinking I should be doing, what I should be, there's a few touchstones in the past couple of years where I can say like, okay, this is where I'm figuring out like this is where my brain wants to go. I just got to let it go there and do that. And funnily enough, I'm 99% sure I was coloring The Debt in my car when I got a text message from Steve Bryant asking me if I wanted to hear some an idea he had.
Well, that's great synergy. It
Yeah.
as we segue right into the main topic tonight about Evie and the Helsings, um, which it's one of those stories I love the concept and I love the idea of it. A fan of some of as a fan of some of like the Universal monsters and like the classic horror stories, to take the idea of like Evie, one of the last Van Helsings, but she's in a rock band and there's also monsters and there's a battle of the bands element to it. And the first issue was such like a perfect setup to tell who some of these characters are, to show off some of the artwork, especially music is a tough kind of thing to get across, but there's such detail to the instruments, such detail to how they're playing in terms of those panels, which I know Don, I see Don's videos pop up with Don, playing. So I know that's a big part. And I see all the guitars in the background.
Oh, that's
I
a green screen. Those aren't real.
Oh no! Oh, okay.
No,
That's a
they are.
very great. That's a really good green screen.
They are very,
But
very much real.
I mean, I just really love the concept. I love all of these elements together. I love Evie's look too. I mean, I just feel like I know who this person is, like somebody who was heavily influenced by Joan Jett, probably, but but a little bit more of like a modern flair.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think folks probably aren't tuning into listening to me. They want to hear from the two of you. So Steve, if you were the one that texted Don about this idea, like what was it that like sparked within you that like I got it? It's Van Helsing, but it's rock music. What was it?
Well, first of all, with the text, if I'm remembering correctly, and Don, is this pretty accurate? I believe I prefaced it by saying this may be the dumbest thing I've ever thought of, or it could be really cool. And I have to remember to look at my camera instead of looking at my screen. I look shifty when I'm looking at my screen.
Yeah.
But no, the original idea was, like I said, possibly the dumbest thing I thought of. I thought of originally a character, Eddie Van Helsing, and the original logo for the pitch was the Van Halen logo, with the wings coming off the V and the H from like Van Halen 2. I think it was on the first album too, but it said Van Helsing instead of Van Halen. I sent that to Don, but if I remember correctly, it was after Eddie Van Halen had died, and this idea kept gnawing at me, but I also knew it was in really poor taste. And Don had the brilliant idea of gender swapping the lead character. Instead of it being Eddie Van Helsing, it became Evie Van Helsing. And I feel like that was kind of the linchpin for it to stop being just a gag. Because, originally, and I think it's in the Kickstarter, but I think it was in my original thing to Don. It's, Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets This Is Spinal Tap by way of Ash versus Evil Dead. And originally the thought was it would be a lot more over the top, a lot more humor. But I feel like once Don gave us Evie instead of Eddie, the character stopped being a cipher and started to become a character. And, we email each other back and forth or text each other back and forth and built this character. And suddenly, none of these characters are a gag anymore. They, we love all of them, and they're all filled with flaws and strengths, and that's when it starts to get good. So that's kind of my take on where we came from. Don, feel free to disregard and say no, it was all my idea.
I wasn't ignoring you guys. I was actually seeing like I still had the text from Steve.
Oh,
about it. I wasn't able to find it. Yeah, Steve did text me like, I have this idea that could potentially be really stupid, and that's just like saying, that's just me being like, yes, let's go. Like, don't even tell me what it is. Let's just do it. If you think it's really dumb and ridiculous, then I know I'm probably going to enjoy it. And it wasn't dumb and it wasn't ridiculous. It was actually really, 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 really cool. And I did suggest the gender swapping, mainly, because one, I felt like I didn't have like this huge like feeling I need to change it for any any other reason than it just felt like, no, it should be. And I think I said Edie. They try to keep the ED from the Eddie and the Edie, kind of like Edie Falco. And I think you replied with Evie because you probably heard me say it weird. And I'm like, that's even better. Like, you know, um, and then also, you know, it's just, I am someone who, you know, I enjoy, you know, female fronted rock bands and metal bands and stuff like that. So having that perspective of having that be our main character was very appealing to me. And yeah, she is heavily influenced by Joan Jett by way of Lita Ford, by way of I'm totally forgetting her name, even though I've said it probably a million times. The lead, Lizzie Hale from Hailstorm. You know, like those three are kind of like the primary ingredients to the soup and the stew that is Evie's look and kind of attitude, from my perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Don, with you taking on, I mean, I know Steve, I think, is lettering, doing some of the covers, and you know, and writing duties with with you in terms of putting the story together, and you're doing the artwork. What did you really get excited about in terms of uh, what it was you were getting to depict on the page? Was it the rock element, the monster element, a little of both?
Definitely both. Like I'm not a vampire guy. Like I don't like vampire movies for the most part. And then once, I kind of sat with it for a minute, I'm like, no, it's not I don't like vampires. Like I don't like the romantic vampire. I don't like the Interview with the vampire. I like 30 Days of Night vampire. I like Blade 2 vampires, which is nasty things. And then I'm like, well, it could be fun to kind of like do both a little bit, kind of have our, you know, uh, overall bad guy kind of be more that romanticized guy, but have, different levels of these vampires. Like they kind of look different based on different stages of when they got turned and things like that. And all the stuff that's in my head that, I've told Steve that I've probably info dumped on him before. And it really bears no like importance to the story overall. But in my head, like this is all going on. Like, oh, this guy's going to look a little more monstrous because he was, this far removed from a more pureblood vampire. And, as they get hungry, they become more monstrous and things like that. And then also on the flip side of it, I really wanted to draw a band. And then I started cursing myself once I realized, oh, I'm really, really picky about how I draw instruments. Because I've said this before, like there's plenty of artists who take plenty of liberties with drawing instruments and stuff like that. That does not, I'm not saying they're doing it wrong. I'm not saying it bothers me. No, it's fine. It's all good. It's just when I do it, it just looks like trash unless I get it as close as possible. So I actually since I draw digitally, I actually ended up making myself brushes of the different guitars being used and things like that. So I can kind of have like a starting point with at least the the measure the measurements and placements of everything. And I made string brushes so you can have like different gauge strings and really, really nerdy stuff. But it's the kind of thing that I feel like I wanted to bring to the book, to just have this little bit of extra thing that no one's going to notice except for anyone I tell, which is everybody probably, but also anyone who's a musician themselves. And they're like, oh, wait, those strings are actually different thicknesses. Like, they actually, gauge down, or, that actually looks like the, Les Paul shape. That looks like a, Strat shape, or the guitars and all that. So that's just, kind of what excited me about doing all that. But as I got the scripts from Steve and things like that, like just the story itself was something like I couldn't not be excited about telling. And, Steve's, the best collaborator I've ever had on anything. And he's always open to whatever ideas I have. He lets me just kind of like spew idea things at him. And, there's been a few things where he's like, okay, we can do that. And then he like weaves it in far better than I could have ever expected it to be, and that's just, that's really exciting as an artist to like be able to do that. And Steve being a great artist himself, it's nice to know that like if I'm doing something and I'm like, it's just not working, I can always go to Steve and say, hey, this isn't working. Or, Steve, I hope he knows that it's an open door. If he's like sees pages coming in, he's like, you know what, can we do this? Can we do this? and all that. So there's a lot of trust, I think, between us in terms of like, we really want to give our best for this book. And that's really what I hope it comes through, is that Steve and I are just, wanting to do the absolute best work we can possibly do on this book, because we were really excited about it.
Well,
So
yeah,
Steve,
and I
I
mean,
wanted to, no, go ahead.
I just wanted to build on that with the back
Yeah.
and forth that we have. It's really cool because I had plotted out the beats for the first story arc, but I generally just think in terms of, by issue 12, maybe we'll resolve kind of the big bad. But that was all I had. And Don has a great idea for the second arc that nicely builds upon what we've done. And I'm like, oh, I can weave that in. And once he gave me the idea for the second arc, I suddenly started to think about elements that I wanted to bring in for arc 3 that kind of shift us. The idea is to keep moving the characters in and out of this fictional LA that we've got them in, that is contemporary, but also a throwback to 1980s. In the same way that like the Tim Burton Batman movie was contemporary, but also the 30s. That's kind of the thing we're playing around with on this. But yeah, Don gave me this idea for 2 and just laid out the beats and the characters and everything, and it was great. So it makes building issue arc 3 a lot more solid. And he came up with the perfect kind of final, the way to close out the showdown with the big bad and chef's kiss. I can't wait to get there, but that's 10 issues from now. But it's pretty cool when a collaborator can throw you this idea that is so perfect, and you can just go, oh yeah, I can work with that. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Had a question, but I was so excited to build on what Don said.
No, that's perfect. And I kind of dovetailed into exactly what I was going to ask you and talk about. Because I was curious, when you start getting into it, if you do plot things out, that far ahead, and then if you outline things, like I know Don was saying that he kind of would spew ideas at you, and then you could take them and weave them in. But in terms of like, do you, once you like talk it out, do you then start to like outline and then go back and forth? Like, do you have to have like a solid base before you start scripting, or do you just get a couple ideas down and start going?
I always think of myself as not so much a writer, but an artist who writes, because I came into this, from a drawing background originally. So
Sure.
before I even start on a script, I'll just like open a Word doc and just kind of, I'll have an idea of how I want to lay it out, and I'll write, beats, page 1, this, or page 1 through 5, this happens. Because I do think in terms of a spread. So you've got page 1 on a right-hand page. You open it up, you have 2, 3, open it up again, 4, 5. So generally it's 5 to 7 pages will be our opener. And then I just break everything down in terms of 2-page spreads. And again, I think a lot of this comes from, I've worked in publishing for over 30 years. So I always think about the pre-press and all that nonsense too. But that's pretty much how I write, is I just do a beat sheet of what happens on each page. And more often than not, it kind of lays out okay. And, when I'm writing this stuff, because I hate it when a writer specifies, Bill punches guy number 1 with his right hand while holding a pencil in his left at ear height. And panel 2, the guy that Bill is punching is falling back, standing on his left foot. Our perspective, our point of view is 4 feet in the air to the right of them. Just when it's too much like that, I'd rather just say, the fight starts here. This is the scene where it starts, and then I'll have like 3 pages written of just fight scene. Pace it however you like. I'll add sound effects, and then I'll say what happens on the last panel, and then Don can play to his strengths and stage stuff much better than I can describe for him, because he gets to kind of direct and build it out, which is how it should be, because comics are a visual medium, and Don's doing the heavy lifting on this. So, but I mean, if he looked at it and said, dude, you've got to give me more than this, obviously I would, but he just looks at this and goes, oh, I got this. And that's really gratifying as a collaborator, to have somebody that just goes at it hammer and tongs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to check out the preview pages on the Kickstarter, that fight scene that you see in the preview pages for issue 2, that was one of those instances where Steve's like, this happens, they fight, and here's, it ends with this, and go nuts. And then, I tell Steve, I can't wait. And then I stress and stress and stress and stress. And then I send Steve some layouts, and he's like, looks great. And I'm like, all right, I can relax.
The stress never shows up in the work, though, dude. The stress never shows up in the work. You always look like you're confident and having a ball.
It's I liken it to, like, if it's the type of stress when, like, you're struggling, like lifting weights or something. Like, yeah, in the moment you're not having, but you feel accomplished a little bit once you got over it, and then you're like, okay, we're good now.
So when you send me layouts, should I say, give me 2 more reps? I'll see myself out.
Maybe.
So the rest of the team, in addition to the two of you, it's Jason Millay on colors, and Chris Murin is editing.
Yeah.
And kind of, so how did everybody else come together? And I mean, is it kind of like a well-oiled machine at this point into issue 2?
I don't mean to keep taking over, but apparently I'm gonna. Chris has been editing the main book that I do, Athena Voltaire, kind of a 1930s pulp thing, for probably close to a decade. And he also edits another book that I write but don't draw, called Ghoul Scouts, and another one I kickstarted called The Catch. And Chris is always this important voice that I like to bounce stuff off of, because he's one of those editors that instead of saying do it this way or this is wrong, he'll say, I think you're trying to get to point B, and I think the best way to get there is here. Or he'll say, he'll always give a great reason on this, like, you're telling on this, you should be showing, and leave it open for Don to draw it this way. Or if he's editing something I'm drawing, trust your instinct. And he's always really good about kind of getting the best out of you that way. And then Jason, I have known for probably 25, 26 years. We met at a Graphic Artists Guild meeting. We were both 2 comic people, and he was starting to break into storyboards at the time, and I thought I wanted to break into storyboards, but I ended up moving downstate. But yeah, he's been working in boards, first in advertising, and now he's like the main TV and film storyboarder in Chicago for anything that films there. So he does like all the Dick Wolf, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, all those shows. And so in his downtime, for fun, and because he has friends that make comics, he'll color our comics, and he'll sometimes draw comics. And he's just amazing. And he's so, he colors my work. He colors Don on this book. He colors Ghoul Scouts with Mark Stegbauer. And I feel like he elevates all of us. He's, again, one of those people that he has a strong style and a strong voice, but it never overpowers the line art. So I don't know. I'm just really comfortable working with friends, and with indie comics, there's always not really much money in it. So it's fun when you have a few friends that are just like, hey kids, let's put on a show, and everybody goes along for the ride. So yeah, that's kind of those guys. And
Yeah, I definitely just kind of like walked into a well-oiled machine here, and I was just like, okay, I'm good. Like I like Chris a lot. I don't really have any direct like his working relationship is more with Steve before I get anything. And then I'm sure, if he has things to say, it probably comes through Steve or whatever. But just working with Chris just on the promotion side of the Kickstarter and all that, he's just been such a great I don't want to say, I don't want to like make it seem like but he's a great cheerleader. He's a great, like, he's just really pumped up about the book as well. And he's, always, making sure he's getting the posts out and doing things like that alongside with us. And that's really, really encouraging. And Jason, I met Jason before we started working together because I've known Steve for, just over a decade now, I'd say, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I think actually, what did I say last time? I think it was C2E2 2009, probably.
Oh, holy cow. So, hey,
Yeah.
we're closing in on a 15th anniversary next year.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a comic book anniversary.
Yeah. So, I'd known Steve for quite a while, and Steve's seen me, from back when I was just kind of like getting back into comics to kind of dipping my toes back into drawing again and starting to do my own things. And, we had, bounced around ideas back and forth before, or at least the idea of working together on something before. And some things panned out, some things didn't pan out or whatever. But this, when this came up, it just kind of felt like the easiest decision to make. And having, I don't think Jason was attached when we were first talking about it, but I was aware of Jason's work, and it's an interesting thing drawing a book when you have the impression that both the writer and the colorist are so much better than you at drawing that you're just like, man, I gotta not screw this up because these guys are gonna be staring at this thing. But I looked at Jason's work from when he worked on Girl Scouts and other stuff, and I had an expectation of what it was going to look like when he colored Evie, and then I got some of the pages in, and it was nothing like I thought. But it still floored me. It was still amazing because he put so much thought into his colors. Like, Steve mentions it's the side gig for him or whatever, but he does not half-ass it at all. As Steve told me, like we have these fictional venues that the band's playing and stuff like that are kind of based off of real venues, with just a little silly twist on the name or something like that. And Jason actually researched how those venues light their stages and mimic that, and it's just amazing. Like, I'm thinking there's going to be all this rendering and all this stuff, but he manages to just like get the vibe of everything right. And that was so much more important than anything else. And it just, it gets better every time I see some new pages. Like, we shared some colored pages with you earlier, and some of those I haven't seen those yet.
Oh, really?
So I'm like, oh, what's this?
Yeah, well, they look great. They look great.
Yeah.
So you're in for a treat. But, well, I mean, the level of detail, though, in terms of those types of things that the two of you are talking about, in terms of, you just said Jason researching, LA venues and how they light their stage, those types of things, to you, Don, trying to get the instruments just right. I mean, how many other comics, if the focus is a band and like a Helsing monster type of story, is really going to pay that close attention to, all right, Evie's going to play this guitar like Jimi Hendrix. It's going to be left-handed and upside down and all those things, like, and try to get it just right. I mean, to create, you said it was nerdy, but I mean, there's going to be other artists who are listening to this like, wow, Don made a brush just for the strings.
I mean, guitar nerds are just as bad as comic nerds. We all have our preferences, the silly arguments we get into. People want to say like, oh, who'd win in a fight, Batman or Spider-Man, and guitarists have like, what's the better tone wood, rosewood or ebony on your fingerboard, and it's just like it makes no sense. Like it's just these stupid things we argue about. But it is important to me to do those things, and it goes a little bit further than that too, because when the band's playing, I make sure they're playing the same song. Their notes are in the right spot. They're doing the right fingerings on the guitars. Granted, with the drummer, I'm a little loosier-goosier with that. But like, I can point to like any, time I've drawn them playing, and one of them will be playing this chord, the other one will be playing the same chord, maybe the octave higher. Someone's doing that. Like I know what they're playing, and again, that's just part of like what makes sense to me with putting it all together. And I hope the people who also kind of like those things pick up on it and enjoy it. And for the people who don't notice those types of things at all, that's cool too. Like I just hope they just enjoy it as it is, and it's not something I went around nitpicking on other guitar, or other band stuff. I read this, my buddy Bob Quinn, he had that fantastic Black Cat Social Club that came out recently. And, I don't even remember checking or even like wanting to look to see if like they're all playing like the same thing like that, because it's about a band as well. It was just, that level of scrutiny is only to myself, and it's not to anybody else, because I can separate that and just enjoy what people are doing. Because, there's people like Daniel Warren Johnson who like, I'm 100% sure if he wanted to, he could make sure everything's 100% technically accurate, but he goes for like the vibe and the mood. Like I once described his art as his art is a guitar solo. Like that's what it is. It's just, it can be just like seem like it's wild and unstructured, but it's just so at the same time, it's also just so tight and melodic. And it's just like, okay, so, none of us are going to be Daniel Warren Johnson. So, I kind of focus on where, where my nerdiness can take me, and where I can, where I think I can add that extra layer to the book.
I do have a question for Don. Who would win in a fight, Leo Fender or Les Paul?
Oh, I'm pretty sure Les Paul would win in the fight.
See, my money would have been on Leo. I hear he fights dirty.
I think.
And plus, a bass weighs more, so right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you got that. I don't know how much did that first Les Paul weigh. I don't know. Those things were pretty hefty. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Steve, in terms of like your background, not in terms of art or being in publishing, but in terms of music and bringing to this, like, do you have a musical background?
I like to refer to myself as like a recovering bass player. Gosh, I haven't, played in probably over 30 years. But yeah, I mean, in high school and college, I thought, I was in bands and stuff. But at a certain point, I did realize that as a musician, I make a pretty good illustrator. And I put everything away, and that was that. And I just kind of focused on this. But yeah, I mean, I could probably, fumble my way through a few riffs on a bass or a guitar, but I don't have the dexterity anymore. I look at like Don doing these Instagram videos and stuff like that, and I'm like, holy crap, he's got chops, which is really cool.
That's just what people see. They don't see like the 10 times I'm like doing the most simple thing and I screw it up endlessly,
And there's the cursing that goes with it, right?
Yeah. It definitely is the funny thing with, because I tend to I have my webcam set up, and I have my recording program for my guitars set up to route through to my web program, OBS, if anyone's familiar with that. And it's not just to like make Instagram videos or anything like that. It's just because I am very much a visual person. So when I'm trying to, because even though I can record what I'm doing, if I don't like record the visual of what I'm playing, it's going to take me way too long to figure it out later if I want to do something with it. So it's just my computer is probably overloaded with just stuff I don't post or whatever. I'm just always ready to kind of record in case I come up with something. And if I think something's pretty decent, then I'll, pop it up on the gram or something like that. But for the most part, yeah, that's kind of where that all stems from. But yeah, there's a lot of fumbling around.
Can I interject something too on this? On the first campaign, we had a stretch goal that Don did a bunch of tracks and built out a song from Evie and the Helsings, where you played all the instruments, correct? Or played or programmed all the instruments.
Played or programmed, yeah.
And yeah, we've got a stretch goal for that again. And it's a really fun layer to have a collaborator that not only is a kick-ass artist, but is also an incredibly talented musician, because doing a book about music, I mean, the only thing that would be better is if he actually killed vampires in his spare time.
Yeah,
but
that might be a little too literal.
Having a guy that can do this is pretty cool.
But yeah, I mean, this book seems to lend itself perfectly to the type of thing that, it has a soundtrack with it, or an original song or something along those lines. I mean, it seems to make, perfect sense to have all of that, go along with it.
Well, I've written music for all of my creator-owned projects. My first book, Pax of the Low Country, that's where I kind of like got my feet wet recording music again and working with synths and stuff like that. And I tried to do my best metal version of John Carpenter for that album. And sometimes I listen back to it, I'm like, there's some decent stuff on there. And then I had another creator book that I was doing on Patreon that I kind of had to stop because I just too many things came up and I just couldn't get the momentum back with it. But I had like an EP's worth of instrumental metal songs for that book as well. So the minute, Steve and I decided that Evie and the Helsings was going to be a thing, I knew I was going to make a song for it, So Steve may not have known, but I knew. And, ultimately, these songs, they're instrumentals right now, but the goal, I'm going to leak it now. The goal is if we can make it to a collected edition of the book, of this first arc, we're going to hire a female rock singer to sing on those tracks. So we'll actually have like a full on Evie and the Helsings, 4, maybe 5 song EP with actual vocals and stuff like that. And things like that. So that's ultimately the goal for that, but that's all stretch goals. That's all, if we can get there, but
right.
You better.
It's that kind of stuff that's super exciting to us, though, as creatives on this book, because this is stuff that you wouldn't be able to do within the context of a publisher. But crowdfunding stuff, we get to do all these fun little indulgences that I really hope are genuinely added value, because we try to come up with stretch goals that, if we were backing something, wouldn't it be cool to have a downloadable EP, or even find a way to burn it as a CD or something like that, to have a physical piece of media to send out in a record sleeve. I don't know, and these are the ideas that go through our heads, and it's kind of fun. And that's, again, the beauty of like a platform like Kickstarter, where you can do this and people are not just buying the comic or a collected version of the comic, but they're buying all these fun things that they can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, with the Kickstarter, and crowdfunding, no one's going to tell you no, right?
Yeah.
If you have an idea and you want to do it, no one's going to tell you no. You can put it together. I mean, I love all the different covers. I always think that's kind of I think sometimes it gets to a point for me where I think like there's too many covers for some things, but you guys have some really great like backup covers you can get. I think issue number 2 has an homage to what is it? House of Secrets, right?
House of Secrets. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I really
first appearance of Swamp Thing.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That looks great for number 2, and there's a few others. In terms of the first Kickstarter, were you? I mean, I think you ended up with just a little over 500 backers. Which I think is great. Were you Is that where you thought it would end up? Were you surprised at the response to it? What was the deal with the first one?
I don't want to speak out of turn about it, but literally like the day of, I think Steve's like, I'm dropping the goal down another to 6,000 from 7,000 just to be safe. And I'm like, okay, if you think so. I was confident, but I had not been the main focus or shared focus of a successful Kickstarter yet, so I didn't know. And Steve had done multiple issues of the Catch and Ghoul Scouts and Athena Voltaire stuff. Like he's been Kickstarter since Kickstarter was started. So I was like, okay, let's go. And then 26 hours later, we're funded, and it just keeps going and going and going. And then we ended up with some over 500 backers, over 15K. And Steve and I were just hoping to hit 6. We were, and that's kind of how we approached this one as well. We've just hit our second stretch goal of a 9K. But when we started, we're like, we just want to get funded. We want to get the book. We understand like the second issue, even though we offer the first issue as well, we can't have the same expectations of like that. Because, it might be, there might be plenty of people like me who like, oh, this series is being kickstarted. Oh, I really like this first issue. I want to get the collection. So when the second one comes in, I'll just buy the digital as opposed to the physical, and that's a lower tier. That's a lower, cost or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly cool. Like, I mean, that's how I buy stuff, it's perfectly fine. So we understood like that there's stuff like that could be, what's going on. And I think the fact that we have just under 2 weeks left and we're at 9K and it looks like we're, within shooting distance of that 11K for the next song, that stretch goal. That would be just, icing on the cake of this year so far. It's, so to answer your question, in my usual rambling way, no, we just wanted to be funded. And so anything past that was just humbling and exciting, and just we're so glad people really enjoyed the book afterwards. But we're really glad people were so excited and supportive of everything. And we do have quite a few variant covers, and I think the cool thing is Steve and I kind of have our system for it. With the first Kickstarter, I'm always doing the main cover. Steve's doing the B cover, I guess we call it.
Yeah.
And then we have the black and white cover. And Steve did the first, it was a black and white toned version of his cover in the first issue. And this time it's my issue, my cover that's, got additional like screen tone effects and stuff like that to make it more appealing as black and white. And then we had the metal cover, which, Steve did the first issue. And then I convinced him, let's do another one. I wanted to do another one. And now it's like, okay, that'll be something we trade off. And then we go and we meet in the middle with the retro cover where I'll pencil it and Steel ink it. And, so we feel like that's kind of, if you have a preference for a type of cover for your book, I think we run the gamut of like, because there's definitely people who love the book and they're definitely they're definitely Steve fans over being fan of what I'm doing. And that's cool. And I'm sure those are people who are buying his covers and stuff like that. And that's great. That's another, I think, huge bonus of having, an artist as also as the writer. I can't speak to other Kickstarters, but, when we talk about who brings what to the table, like, while I spend a lot of time on the art and I'll do the music thing and we try to do the promo stuff, we try to split that up as much as possible. And Steve does the writing and the lettering and, some of the flatting, even though I told him, please farm that out, my friend. Hopefully he's been listening. We'll eat it. We'll eat it. And then he also, sets up the Kickstarter page. He manages the fulfillment and the lettering and all these things. And so while it seems like, oh, I'm doing the artist, I'm doing the quote unquote heavy lifting, there's so much more stuff that's got to be lifted that Steve's doing that this book would not happen in the slightest if he didn't do. So I really feel like this whole thing is I'm not even gonna say it's, in terms of like work, I'm not even gonna say it's like 50-50. I feel like Steve puts in a lot more work than I have to.
I
When
would
you
just
factor in like the fulfillment thing and things like that, and dealing with the printers and all that, I'm happy to try to do that. We tried to figure that out actually, but we live just too far from each other to make
but
like the driving, me driving in for a day to work out. Unfortunately, I have two small kids and a whole bunch of other stuff that kind of like didn't make that happen. But hopefully we're working on
yeah, we
splitting
have an
that.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve gave me a giant box of mailers when we had a signing at Challengers Comics in Chicago a few weeks ago, and I didn't realize how heavy that box was when I had to walk like 3 blocks to our car in the store.
Well,
It's
Well,
all those
yeah,
things like running a
we'll meet
Kickstarter
halfway.
campaign.
yeah,
It's all those things you
yeah,
don't think about. You're just like, oh, someone's got to
yeah,
do all this, you know.
yeah, and
But
and but yeah, I'm I couldn't be more than happy to be doing this book with Steve. I love this book. I love these characters. I love, even if I have an idea for something and Steve's like, I don't know if that'll fit what we're planning. I know that it's not because it's not, it's not Steve's idea. That's why it's not happening. It's because overall I trust him that it makes more sense, you know, and you don't get that a lot with people. And I hope Steve feels the same way. I'm happy to, as much as everybody else, I hope to see a lot more Athena Voltaire hitting stands when that can happen. I'm happy to, do Evie in the Helsings with Steve as long as we can do it.
awesome.
Um, yeah, and
Yeah, Steve.
like, well, just to the point about the Kickstarter campaign, it's really weird launching a new book on Kickstarter because I mean there are some people I feel like that can do it. I feel like Charlie Stickney of White Ash Comics has mastered crowdfunding in a way that so many of us just kind of look and scratch our heads. But even he, if it's something in the White Ash universe, I think is always going to be, you know, that's always going to be his strongest one. And kind of scaling that down to where I'm at in the pecking order. Um, my main book, as we've said a couple times for a number of years, was Athena Voltaire, and yeah, that was my biggest Kickstarter. But it was also something I'd been doing, originally as a web comic, and then it was at Ape Entertainment, and then Dark Horse, and then Action Lab, and that's kind of where we're in stasis because I'm part of that class action lawsuit against them.
Oh, okay.
But obviously, having built it up over a number of years, that Kickstarter came out guns blazing.
Right.
Um, and then when we did the campaigns for The Catch, which I think is a great book, um, it 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 always funded, but it never like built, which was why it was really cool to just see the reaction to Evie when it came out. And to this day I still don't know if it was. Um, I used to have a much better social media presence. Don definitely rules that in our pairing now. When I had a crappy day job where I was at my desk all day, I could promote the crap out of these things on social media. Now, I teach classes at a university for a day job, and I can't like say, hold that thought, kids, and post to Twitter or Blue Sky or anything like that. And so Don has mastered so many different social media platforms. So I don't know if that's the secret sauce on why this launched better than previous stuff, or if it's I hate to use the pretentious word, but the zeitgeist of it. Because you had our first issue launched 6 months after Eddie Munson debuted on Stranger Things, and Master of Puppets like ended up hitting the singles chart because of that appearance. Or I don't know if it was the soundtrack from HBO Max's Peacemaker series, which was all hair metal. I don't know if we were the beneficiaries of all these things kind of happening, or if it was, you know, the high concept or the preview pages or just a little bit of both of all of the above. But it hit at the right time, and it's been, you know, I know this sounds like a love fest, but it's been a pleasure to collaborate with Don and Jason and Chris. And there's really nothing more fun than making comics with your friends, which sounds like something a 9-year-old would say. But I mean, you know, at my heart on this, I'm still that 9-year-old that is drawing on printer paper or copy paper or whatever. And this is a blast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a negative, though. I mean, for the longest time, and even sometimes still today, depending on what circle you're in, some folks still look down at comics as a medium, as something for kids. And for the longest time, they really were. They were, you know, at a newsstand and then on a spinner rack. And, you know, we know, having read so many comics, that there's every genre imaginable for kids, for adults, whatever it might be. But I mean, you know, in 2023, as stressful as life can be, no matter who you are, to say that there's no better feeling than just making comics with your friends. I mean, yeah, that's, I think, something to be celebrated. Like, that's the goal, right? To just,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
we're getting together, we're having a good time, and we're putting out something that other people are enjoying or are connecting with, whether or not they are really digging into Evie's story about having to take upon the legacy or the mantle of her family, or fighting the, you know, the forces of evil, whatever that might be in her life, or they're just, you know, there to have a good time and enjoy the artwork. They're connecting with it on some level. And I mean, there's nothing, I don't know. That's awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't make, it's not saying that it's not like a ton of work. Obviously it is endless amounts of hard work.
Yeah.
And you know, being a parent of two small kids, I know, you know, Steve's a parent, you're a parent, you know, I think we can all empathize with the fact that it's when the good things happen from it, when the Kickstarter is doing well, when people are connecting to it, all that hard work seems so much sweeter. Just like when you have kids, like, yeah, there are definitely days that are weeks, you know, but when you have
there are
those
days
moments,
that's a great quote, Don.
when you have those moments, when you see those things, when, especially when they're really little, and you see them, those little personalities coming out, and these cool things, and you're just, you know, having a conversation with them one day, because that's the first, and you realize this is the first like full on, like, back and forth conversation we've ever had. You know, you realize, like, it just it hits, you know, it's like, it's a very similar feeling to me, you know. Granted, you know, my kids are more important than anything else, but you know, you know what I mean. You have all that hard work is worth it, and it's just, you know, I want to make comics until I can't, and I've long told myself that, you know, I don't think I'm going to be drawing X-Men for Marvel anytime soon, but that's fine, because I'd rather be telling my own stories. I'd rather be telling these stories with my friends, and you know, as long as I can do it, you know, as long as I can find a way to do it in outside of whatever work things I have or don't have or what have you, I'm going to do it. And, you know, I'm drawing another book right now that it's like almost the exact opposite of the working relationship with Steve, and not in an overly negative way, but just, you know, I am the arm of the person. But that's fine. I could, because I can do that as long as I have Evie. You know, as long as I have the home of Evie, where I'm like, okay, this is where everything's, you know, feels right and everything. I can do this other thing that definitely, you know, has its own moments of enjoyability, but it's also like, it helps me afford to just enjoy
Yeah.
Evie as well, you know.
Right.
Both, you know, both financially and just creatively, you know. And it's, yeah, it there's no better thing, I think, than making comics. And there's just no better time now. You know, Steve made the mention of, like, I mastered social medias, and Far from it, because especially these days, it feels like nothing's getting any traction anywhere with anything. Like I love Blue Sky as a social platform. Like just that feels the most like Twitter back in the early days, where you're just kind of getting to know people and you're just kind of talking and making dumb jokes or just being cool. Yeah, I'll promote stuff on there, but I never have any expectation that it's going to be shared or anything like that, because it just feels kind of wrong almost right now.
Oops.
And then with Twitter, I I'm not calling it the other thing. It's Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I can post something and like, oh, okay, a decent amount of retweets or whatever, or likes, and then later that day post something else and it's just like silence, death, and it's like I don't take it personal. I never did, but it's always like it's just like I don't know what's going on with this, and it's so hard to navigate. And Instagram, oh man, I don't know how anyone like everyone who has like cultivated like a huger following on Instagram who's an artist, like I don't know how they did that. Kudos to them, because it just seems like so much work to try to keep up with that one. Like posting at least 2 photos a day and 2 reels and a story, and it's just like, oh my god, like this is work. This is work. And I've if my wife wasn't like wasn't not necessarily anti, if she was just like, no, I don't mess with social media, I'd probably ask her to do all my stuff. Like, can you just do this for can you do this for me?
I don't know how
Yeah.
anyone navigates
Yeah.
social media. I try to promote the podcast or promote Comic Book Yeti stuff on Twitter.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
most
yeah.
times it's just silence. I just recently tried to get into TikTok to see if and I'm ancient according to that platform, but I tried. So
like the idea of doing those things is fun to me. Like I get the idea of it being fun, but it's also like I don't have the time to do all this, and I don't like. Can I just make the thing and say, here it is, and then the people who actually said, hey, I want to follow this guy, see it and make their decision there. I mean, I wish it was that simple, but obviously it's not. And don't get me started on threads. I don't even know what the hell's going on over there.
But that's been the whole shift over to content creator versus creatives sharing their work. Is suddenly you have to make like Don said, 2 posts and 2 reels or whatever to try to keep engaged. I feel like pre-2016 Twitter was the perfect place for authors and for comic book artists. My beef with Instagram is everything is square format. You can't zoom in on the artwork. If you're looking on your tablet or your computer or your phone, it's always the same. Whereas on Twitter, again, pre-2016, when if you clicked on an image, you could open it in another window, and if somebody saved it at 150 dpi, you could zoom in. You see a lot more line work, and the proportions of the image are retained, and it was beautiful. It was a great way for artists to share their work. And then Cory Doctorow has a whole thing on how every one of these platforms just goes down, and that happened to Twitter. So
hopefully something else will rise up.
I'm hoping for Blue Sky. I really am.
I think Blue Sky I think Blue Sky will be it, but it won't be the same. It won't be the same like depth of people you're able to reach. But in terms of just general functionality and being able to just be social with people and share things, I think Blue Sky, if they keep taking their baby steps. I know it's kind of frustrating for a lot of people that some things aren't enacted yet, but I feel like I'd rather have them do that than go whole hog and then it's another hive situation again. It's just like and there's been so many of these things, and I really think that we're kind of sectioning everything back off, and we're getting back to like the way it used to be before this, where it was all forums, and
I mean, that's what Discord is.
it's just going to be a different. It's just going to be a different it's just going to be a different thing, because it's going to be these, feed driven social medias, but we're not all going to be on the same ones. We're all not going to, be on the same groups, or whoever knows how the moderation is going to start going with those things. And things like Discourse I know are kind of like forums, and I've tried Discourse and it's too much. It's too much for me. Like there was one, like I'm like, oh, I'll go on some metal discourses, that'll be fun, and it is literally like a ticker from like the stock exchange or something just going off, and I just like, no, I cannot keep up with this.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah,
this?
I'm on one, and like you go and check it, and it's, I
Yeah.
sound like such an old man, but it's like like 30 messages.
Yeah.
Who has the time?
So
No.
there's
are
like
comics that need to be made. That's all I'm
Right.
saying. There are
Yeah.
comics that
Yeah.
need to be made.
Exactly.
Well,
it
to
takes away.
turn back into comics, and just kind of wrap things up in a bit. Evie and the Helsings, number 1 and 2. It's on Kickstarter right now. You can go there, search for it. I'm sure if you go to Don or Steve's social media pages, you'll be able to find a link for another 2 more weeks, and you can get Evie and the Helsings.
Can I interject? You can also get there by typing evieandthehelsings.com. It'll redirect.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Direct link. It'll get you right to the Kickstarter page. And I think, I mean, if you're a fan of like any type of like vampire, universal monster story, especially with the rock and roll element, I think it's a wonderful comic. Both Steve's writing and Don's artwork, as well as the rest of the creative team, Jason and Chris editing. I mean, it really is a wonderful comic. It's a great story. The preview pages for issue 2 look phenomenal. So I encourage you to check it out. 2 weeks left, and yeah, I don't think you're going to be disappointed at all to jump in and find out more about Evie and the Helsings. But I wanted to ask Steve, Don, is there anything else you're working on that you want to direct people to, or that you got coming out soon?
You go first, Don.
Well, as my display here has, not only I have Evie and the Helsings, but I'm also the artist of a book called Spend the Night, which is the brainchild of cult horror director Jackie Kong. If you're familiar with work, she did 80s movies like The Being and Blood Diner. And so that's a horror series about a group of teen girls who have a sleepover. Something terrible happens. They summon a spirit to try to get themselves out of it, but it just gets worse. And the book is, to put it lightly, batshit crazy, because Jackie is very, very, she's like just tossing everything in there that's horror. We have mind control space worms that make people kind of like zombies. We have killer dolls. We have evil spirits, and there's a few more things. And it's just a really, really crazy book that, while I'm not the main creative voice behind it, it's just so crazy. Like I can't like not be a part of it. It's just really, it's kind of, and it's such like a tonal shift from something like Evie and the Helsings. But Spend the Night, I'm wrapping up issue 3 now. It's available through Lunar Distribution, so it's available in comic shops across the country right now. And you should be able to find links to that in my social media. And I'm also the host of the Comics Coffee Metal podcast. It's I try to be twice a month, every other week, and there I just kind of talk to people about comics, coffee, and metal, and the things we're enjoying and the things we're ingesting, and the things we're listening to. And I try to give some recommendations in those fields as well for people. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's been one of the best things I've decided to do. I think that probably had to do a lot with at least getting my name, at least being familiar with people. And I've been able to become such better friends with people I knew before, and meet so many new friends, and just have conversations with people I never thought I would through this podcast. So, Jimmy, as I'm sure like it's just like, oh wow, I just spoke to this person that I've admired for so long, and it's just like amazing, and they're really cool. And so it's that. You can find that at comicscoffeemetal.com. And yeah, you can find me at all the social medias at Don Cardenas Art.
Yeah, I'll put a plug in. I think I mentioned it earlier, but I've listened to quite a few episodes of Don's podcast, and it's always a good time. And whether or not you're in it for the coffee, the comics, or the metal, or all three, two of the three, it's you have really fun conversations with folks, and it's a really kind of easygoing, listen, and I really enjoy it.
That's what I hope. I hope if people who are on there or people who listen to it, like, it was just a relaxing, chill conversation about stuff we're all just enjoying and being nerdy about,
Yeah.
So,
Steve, how about you? You have anything else coming out you want to talk about?
Yeah. By the way, I'm sorry I was distracted for a minute. My dog is right outside the studio and he's staring at me because I'm usually not down here at this time of night. So yeah, I'm working on a few things with friends that hopefully I'll Kickstarter or something like that, because I'm focusing the majority of my efforts on stuff like that, for now at least. My main book, which I mentioned, Athena Voltaire, is part of the class action lawsuit against Action Lab. But I'm still plugging away. I still want to keep working on the book. And Ghoul Scouts is the other book that we have published through Action Lab. We have the 3rd volume done. We're just waiting on the outcome of the lawsuit. So hopefully I'll have those going. I'm going to butcher the title of the book, but I did a short story with writer Alex Segura for Ahoy Comics Cryptid Case Files. So
awesome.
we have an 11-page story in there. I think it's in previews and Lunar's catalog this month. So go to the Ahoy Comics section. I believe it's Cryptid Case Files number 2. And that was really cool to do because I got to put on my artist hat instead of my writer hat. And I've enjoyed Alex's novels, his Pete Fernandez mystery series, and his most recent book, Secret Identity, which merges like 1970s New York and history of the comic book field and a murder mystery all in the same book. And it's a freaking delight. And it was really cool to be able to work with him on this short story because, well, I'm a fan, and yeah, I got to enjoy it. So that's currently being solicited. So those are my big plugs right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I am a big fan of Ahoy Comics. No, go ahead.
So good stuff. I was just going to say on social media, what is on the screen right here at Steve Bryant Art. And then my website is stevebryantcomics.com.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for coming on another Yeti Live and listening to me at the end of the day stumble through a series of questions to get you to talk about your comic book. Thank you. I always appreciate it whenever anyone wants to come on and talk to me. So it's always enjoyable for me, and I hope it's enjoyable for other people watching and listening. And yeah, like I said, I do this because I enjoy it. I enjoy comics, and I enjoy talking to folks like the two of you. And I really like Evie and the Helsings. I think it's a great concept, and I think the whole team executes it very well.
Well, thank
Very
you.
glad to hear it. Yeah, glad to be on the Yeti. And I'll say publicly, Jimmy, I got to get you on my show, so we can chat.
I'd love to.
So I'll have to hit you up sometime in the winter time, based on how my schedule is going. But yeah, it's been a blast to finally be on the video Yeti. Did I get the trifecta? We got the print interview. I was on the Comics Cave.
Grant's podcast, right? Into the Comics Cave, and now you're on the Yeti Live.
I hit the hat trick. There you go.
There you go.
There you go. I can retire now.
But no, I mean, if you know, we heard you say that, you know, people can come on, you know, and you like having us, so we're gonna pester you when issue 3 rolls around.
Yeah, yeah, please, let's do it again. Sure,
This
it'll
was
be a good
great.
time.
It was a blast.
Yeah, I can't wait for issue 2 to be out. So I can't wait for the campaign to end. And yeah, I really enjoy it. So Steve and Don, thank you so much, and good luck. You have 2 more weeks. Good luck with the rest of the Evie and the Helsings campaign.
All right. Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much,
much.
Jimmy.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Yeti Live. Good night.